Okay, so I'm just going to role model one more for you from start to finish, working through it quickly. So for the marathon runners, I've been given a pile of data here. The data is from New Zealand marathons, and I see that I've got the minutes, how long it takes them to complete a marathon, their male, their age group, under 40 or over 40, and their stride length. So if I was going to write questions, there's kind of, a few that I could do here, but I might choose to do how long it takes them to run the marathon and whether they're male and female. So I wonder if the females have a longer, or I wonder if there's a difference in the time it takes an individual to run a marathon between male and female runners. I could also, if I wanted to do, compare times and whether they're under 40 or over 40. I could also compare gender and stride length. So again, I'm looking at my variable being something that I can measure and the groups being just two different categories. So my variable options here are minute and stride length, and my groupings are either gender or age group. So let's go with minutes and gender because that's what's on the graph. So typing quickly there. Is there a difference between the median? You can get your statistic. Median time taken to run a marathon for female runners, my group, compared to male runners, my other group, in the New Zealand marathons. So in New Zealand marathons, that's the best I've got for population because that's what they've told me. This data set is taken from marathons in New Zealand, so that's what I'm going to be specific to. Defining the variables, well, I know I've got time, and this is just the time taken to complete a marathon, measured in minutes. And gender would just be whether the runner identifies with male or female. Right, doesn't take too long to get that done. Okay, so for the next step I'm going to be talking about my analysis. So let's look at the center. Again, the center is just going to be comparing the average that I'm looking at, which is the medians. So let's take a look. My median for females is 248.4 minutes. My median for males is 240.2 minutes. So how would that look if I typed it out? Something you want to be important that you want to make sure that you do is say start all these with from my samples I notice. So get that on all of them. So we would say from my samples I notice. I'm going to pause this so you don't have to listen to me type. So from my samples I notice the median time taken to run a marathon for females is 248.4 minutes, which is 8.2 minutes longer than the male median time to run a marathon, and I've shown my calculation there. Important things again is that I've mentioned from my samples, and nowhere in here did I say in the New Zealand marathons or reference to the population. Shift and overlap. Next one. Well, here I can see that the females are actually shifted further up the scale to the slightly longer marathon time, so you can see that because the middle 50% there is shifted just further above the males, but there is still quite a bit of overlap between here. So again, from my samples I noticed. So from my samples I noticed the middle 50% of the female times to run a marathon is shifted slightly further up the scale to the longer times compared to the male middle 50%. There's a fair amount of overlap between the middle 50% of the male and female marathon times. So here again I'm being specific about my samples, the middle 50%, the male and female groups, and my variable that it's about running the marathon. Okay. Spread would be our next one. And so looking at these box and whisker graphs and dot plots, kind of visually they're actually pretty similar. So we'll have to calculate the range and the IQR just to get that. So one thing that we can do is just get that done first. IQR, remember, OneNote's kind of fun because it will do it for you. So the IQR of the females, put that here, female, that's quarter 3 minus quarter 1, so 281.3 minus 32232, sorry, 0.8. And the range for the females is going to be 371 minus 171.8. IQR for the males. So now that I've got those numbers calculated there, we can say, well, looks like the female IQR is slightly smaller than the male IQR. So, from my samples I notice. So, from my samples I noticed that the IQR of the time taken for the females to run a marathon is slightly smaller than the IQR for the time taken for males to run a marathon. So I can put the evidence in brackets if you want. Sometimes it's easier than trying to put it into the sentence. Female got the time and the units for the males. And what does this show me? This shows me that in my samples there's slightly more variation of the middle 50%. Be really careful about that. It's the middle 50% for the IQR of the time taken for males to run a marathon. The range for the time taken to run a marathon for males and females is similar. Here I've got 199.2 minutes versus 194 minutes. And this shows me overall there is similar variation throughout the whole sample for the males and females. I should put in here to be more specific, times taken to run marathons. So in there, I'm being very specific about males and females, and everywhere left, right, and center I'm trying to make sure that I'm specific about the time taken to run a marathon and get my units. Our next one for the basics would be shape. And if I look at the shape of these two things, I'm going to say that the females is relatively normal and slightly skewed to the right because I've got a longer tail here. And for the males, yeah, I might say bimodal and skewed right because there are kind of two peaks in there. You could sort of see them if you watch the mouse move over those. So that's what I would say. So from my samples dot plots, saying exactly where my evidence is coming from and that it's my samples, I notice the female times to complete a marathon are relatively normal shaped with a skew to the right. So again, I'm talking about times to complete a marathon and the females, and in the next one males and time to complete a marathon, that I get that specific in both of them. Anything else that I'd want to talk about here that I find interesting? No, not really. I mean, you could if you really wanted to talk about some of these more extreme values, but I mean, they're really not that interesting to me. That highest longest female time is a slight outlier, but that's just somebody running slow, and this is a woman who's a little bit faster here, but they're not too extreme for me to really worry about talking about. So my confidence interval, I've got to make sure I've run that, and I think I just did that, so let's take a look. This is the times to run marathons, male and female bootstrap distribution that I've already done. So I've got negative 6.1 and 26.4. Now you'll notice bigger. So that negative 6, again being negative, shows us that the number at the top is going to be slightly bigger, so that shows us that it's possible that the men have a slightly longer marathon time. And the positive number is going to give us that the females are slightly bigger marathon times. So remember that. So if we're going to interpret this, from my samples, bootstrapping confidence intervals, I am fairly sure that the difference between the median time it takes to run a marathon for males compared to females is between negative 6.10 and 24.0 minutes. So first thing I'm going to do there is just say exactly what those numbers are. The next thing I'm going to do is actually interpret that. So this is the part I have to be careful to not get backwards. I'm obviously well modeling. So this means, or this shows us, that it is possible that the male, so the males are on the top of the graph there, so that negative number means that it's possible that the males could have as much as 6.10 minute, or the male's median time to run a marathon could be as much as 6.10 minutes longer than the female's time, and that the female marathon runners could be as much as 2.400 minutes longer than the males. So again, this negative here is telling me that the males can actually be bigger, and the positive is telling me that the females can actually be bigger. So I'm trying to put that into words, that negative 6.10 means that it's chance that the males could actually have a longer marathon time of 6.10 minutes longer than females, and that positive means, well, it's possible the female marathon runners could be longer. So our last step here is to make a claim, and we could say here, I'm going to pause real quick and just read this again. So this shows us that it's possible that the male's median time, which is important to run a marathon, could be as much as 6.10 minutes longer than the female's median times, and the female marathon runners could be, and the median of the female marathon runners could be as much as 24 minutes longer than the median males time. And so again, we're talking here specifically about confidence intervals, about the medians. Okay, and here we also need to complete that with for marathons run in New Zealand, because we are talking about the population here at this point. So just being careful there to get the medians in there. We've got it here and everywhere else. Alright, so making our claim, first question is, does the confidence interval include 0? And it does in this case. So I could say, because my confidence interval includes 0, I am fairly sure that back in the population of the marathons in New Zealand, that I do not have enough evidence to suggest there is a difference between the median time taken for females and males to run a marathon. So again, I have 0 in there, so I can be fairly sure that back in the population of the marathons in New Zealand, I do not have enough evidence to suggest that there is a difference between the median time taken for females and males to run a marathon. And that right there would probably be enough. If you wanted to add to it again, you could kind of reiterate what we said above about that conclusion. My confidence interval suggests that it is possible for the males in male marathon runners in New Zealand to have 6.01 minute longer median run times, and possible that the females could have median marathon times that are 2.24 minutes longer than the males in New Zealand. So again, I'm just sort of rehashing what I said above. So according to my watch, that was roughly 15 minutes or so to get through the basics, and that passes you in the report. So, no ways around it. Just get these practice ones done so you can get feedback and make sure you're doing it, because there are a lot of ways to fail, even in the most simple write-up of just this. If you're forgetting to put in my sample, if you're mentioning the population, or if you're not giving the evidence, or if you stuff up your CI interpretation. So do some practice on these and make sure that you understand what's going on.